Godzilla Minus One is the first Toho Godzilla movie that I have watched all the way through and is the first one that I have seen in theaters. And a lot of you guys have been trying to give me a kick in the butt to see it, and I'm glad you did. This movie was so good. Something that has always put me off with the Toho Godzilla movies is that the characters are so boring and forgettable. But in Minus One, there are so many great characters in the film. The family that we follow in particular was so well developed, and the rest of the characters were also very likable, and I especially liked how they became a part of the family as well. And you care about these characters so much that this is the first Godzilla movie that made me hate Godzilla, which surprised me. Usually you're always waiting for Godzilla to come in and do his thing, but this is the first time where I didn't want him to come in, because I was genuinely worried that he would harm our characters, and boy does he. The destruction in this movie is done so well, and this is the first time where watching Godzilla destroy stuff feels so painful to watch. And the reason for that, and what makes this movie so great, is that this goes back to the roots of the original 1954 movie, where it's about the deeper exploration of the nuclear bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. This will sound strange, but the movie surprisingly works well as a double bill with Oppenheimer, because one of the more common criticisms that have been leveled against Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer is that it avoids showing the destruction caused by the atomic bomb. But you see so much nuclear explosion imagery in this movie and the death toll that it takes that watching this after Oppenheimer is actually very beneficial, because it hits you so much harder as to what the effects of the atomic bomb did. Now, Godzilla was always created as a symbol of nuclear war that was brought to Japan by America, and after all these years, the message still comes through loud and clear, and it even transcends Japan's devastating history. And like any great movie does, there were countless times when I was watching this where I was drawing comparisons to another one of America's wars that is going on today. My mind kept drawing parallels to the nuclear destruction that Godzilla was leaving to the destruction imagery we have been seeing in Gaza. Heck, in this movie, the destruction happens in Ginza. And this movie also works as commentary on that, as it is another place where nuclear bombs are being dropped at the hands of America right now. So the commentary that Godzilla has always stood to represent by the Japanese is better than ever in this movie. And it's what makes this movie even more relevant. So in terms of timing, this movie has released at the perfect time and has commented on something from a perspective that American movies would not. And everything was all brought together by a fantastic score. The score for this movie was great, and it was very tragic, intense, and it even used the classic Godzilla theme so incredibly well. Now let's talk about Godzilla himself. This has to be the strongest I've seen Godzilla. He's also an asshole. Whenever he shows up, he always throws a boat or a train across the city, and that's how he introduces himself every time. He kind of reminds me of the Bishop of Bath and Wales from Blackadder Season 2, where he would always make his entrance by throwing Baldric through the door.
It's that priest. He says he still wants to see you.
And did you mention the baby-eating Bishop of Bath and Wells?
I did, my lord.
What did he say?
He said, I am the baby-eating Bishop of Bath and Wells.
Good Lord.
My lord, the Bishop of Bath and Wells.
Yep, this is what Godzilla is like whenever he enters the city. And after the second time, it just made me laugh.
Yeah, you see, I am a colossal pervert.
Okay, Godzilla never admitted to that, but you get my point. He was so much more fierce in this movie, and Godzilla has gone anywhere from being a villain to a hero, and here, he is a full-on villain. And they even give his atomic breath a recharge cycle this time because it's that powerful, and he has these downright vicious and terrifying eyes. This really was the best version of Godzilla I have seen. It's the lack of good human characters that has always put me off of watching so many of Toho's Godzilla movies before, and even the characters in the Hollywood movies have been below par. But this is the first movie where I really cared, and the characters really carry the movie all on their own. You never feel like you're just waiting for Godzilla to show up, and that is the best compliment I can give the characters in this movie. The film also had really great humor, and this movie did something truly amazing. I have always hated the modern trope in movies where you have a couple who has a kid and they are practically a family, but they don't ever want to get married and they act all awkward about it. I always found that to just complicate the relationships between characters, and it always made their relationships feel illegitimate, half-assed, and needlessly complicated. And this movie at first seemed to be doing the same thing, but as the film goes on, the relationship is explained and it ties up so beautifully by the end that for the first time, I actually was alright with the characters not tying the knot, because they actually developed why the characters didn't get married or become a couple, rather than modern movies doing it because it's 2023.
Aren't you and Owen still like a weird thing?
It's not that weird. He didn't mean weird.
And Godzilla Minus One did it with such earnestness that I couldn't help but love it. And that is a first for me when it comes to these kinds of relationships in films. So, are there any criticisms I have? Well, a few. The first scene that Godzilla had looked like very cheap CGI, and I actually got concerned for a second when I saw that, and the sound design just didn't feel up to par. But thankfully, that was fixed with pretty much all of Godzilla's later scenes. The other small complaint I had is that they could have tightened the runtime of the movie up just a little bit more. And my final complaint is that the movie never managed to get a tear out of me or make me cry. And this movie had a lot of emotional scenes, all that were done very well, but in order for the movie to hit me on an extra emotional level, a movie has to at least make my eyes water. And that never happened with this movie. Other than that, I have no complaints. I really enjoyed this movie, and I am so glad I saw it before the end of the year. And I can tell you right now, it will definitely get a spot on my best movies of the year list. Godzilla Minus One gets a very high 8 out of 10. This is the best Godzilla movie I've seen, and it overthrows my previous favorite, which was Godzilla King of the Monsters. And if this is what we can expect from Toho Godzilla movies going forward, then I cannot wait to see what we get next.